All right, let's turn to Ephesians chapter 4 and read verses 8, 11, 12, and 13. Wherefore he saith, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts unto men. And he gave some apostles, and some prophets, and some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers, for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come in the unity of the faith, and of the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. So, again, we see that gifts were given after the ascension. There are 5 gifts listed here, and we're working our way up the ladder of difficulty or complication as we look at each of these. So we looked at teachers, that's easy. We looked at pastors, that's pretty easy. The most biblical term for pastor is bishop, but we don't need to use the word bishop. We looked at what is the role of a pastor. Now we're going to look at evangelists. So what is an evangelist? That ought to be easy, right? Because like we all know evangelists, you know people that are their title is evangelist. And evangelists are those guys who travel from church to church preaching revivals, right? That's what we call them. That's if you say we're having an evangelist in, then you're speaking of somebody who goes around to churches and preaches. But is that what the Bible calls an evangelist? Let's go to 2 Timothy chapter 4. 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 5. The setting here is Paul is writing his last letter. He knows that he's about to die. He's got a death sentence on him. He's writing to Timothy. Timothy is, contrary to popular belief, not a pastor. Timothy is not in Ephesus. We know that Timothy is not in Ephesus in 2 Timothy. There are several clues. One of them is that he asked Timothy to pick up his cloak in Troas on his way, and he's asked him to hurry up and get to Rome. If you look at a map, it's really interesting. From Ephesus, if you want to go to Rome, you would just get on a ship and you would sail west. Kind of sail around the boot of Italy and go up to Rome there, and it's kind of just a westerly journey. But from Ephesus to Troas is about a 250-mile trip to the north, in the wrong direction if you're headed to Rome. So if Timothy is in Ephesus when he receives 2 Timothy, if he's the pastor of Ephesus, and he's just sitting there pastoring, Paul is asking him to take a 500-mile round trip out of the way to pick up a coat. I mean, just buy another coat. It's like not really necessary. However, it's pretty evident as you continue studying if you're looking for it. If you look for the geographical evidence in 2 Timothy and you compare it with the geographical evidence in 1 Timothy and compare that to Acts, then you find out that Timothy is no longer in Ephesus, left Ephesus a long time ago. Paul mentions several places in 2 Timothy as far as what's going on in those places and whom he has sent to those places, and then we can know that Timothy is not in those places. If, for instance, in verse 10, chapter 4, verse 10, for Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world, is departed into Thessalonica. If Timothy was in Thessalonica, he wouldn't need Paul to tell him that Demas was there with him. So Timothy's not in Thessalonica. Crescens to Galatia. So that tells us Timothy's not in Galatia, or he would know that Crescens was there with him. And Titus unto Dalmatia. So Timothy's not in Dalmatia. But then read verse 12. And Tychicus have I sent to Ephesus. So Timothy's not in Ephesus. He's somewhere to the north or northeast of Troas. He's going to have to pass through Troas to get to Rome. And that, if you get a map and you look at the map, it's very clear. If you look at the locations of Troas, of Ephesus, of Rome, there is no way that Timothy is in Ephesus and leaving in a hurry to get to Paul before he dies We're just going to go just a quick little 500-mile detour to pick up a cloak that was left there. We know that Timothy was not in Asia at all. Ephesus is one of the cities of Asia, because Paul in this same book in 2 Timothy tells Timothy, all they that be of Asia have turned against me. Well, Timothy is not turned against Paul, so he's not in Asia. And also, if Timothy were in Asia, that wouldn't be something that Paul would need to be writing to him about. Instead, because all of Asia has turned against Paul, Paul writes the book of Ephesians and sends it with Tychicus to Ephesus. So while Tychicus is taking the book of Ephesians to Ephesus, to those in Asia that had turned against Paul, another runner is taking 2 Timothy to wherever Timothy is, to the north or northeast of Troas. All of that being said, just to establish the fact that Timothy is not a pastor, he is still a traveling missionary. Read verse 5, 2 Timothy 4:5. But watch thou in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, make full proof of thy ministry. So now, if we read 2 Timothy as instructions to a pastor, then we're going to read it from a completely different angle from its original purpose. And we're going to possibly draw some incorrect conclusions from it. But if we read it as it is, as a letter that is written to a traveling missionary from an older traveling missionary, and its instruction to missionaries, then we can learn some things as I believe it was meant to be understood. So he's telling here, not a pastor, but a missionary. He's telling him, endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, make full proof of thy ministry. So all of that we could study in depth at another time, but we're looking at the work of an evangelist right now. Because we're looking at this gift. We're told in Ephesians 4:11 that God has given gifts unto men. So Ephesians 4 that we're studying, at the time that 2 Timothy is written, Tychicus is on his way to Ephesus with Ephesians, the epistle to the Ephesians. And so Paul has, at the end of his life, written the book of Ephesians and sent that. And then right after sending that, he writes 2 Timothy, and that's the last thing that he writes. So as we read this, do the work of an evangelist. As Timothy read that, at that point, the Ephesians are reading about how God has put into the church apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. And that he's done that for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the saints, and that he's done it till that's all accomplished, till we're all in his presence and we're all perfect in his presence. So that's the context here, where we read, do the work of an evangelist. But what is the work of an evangelist? Is he telling Timothy to travel around and preach revival meetings in churches? Or is he saying something else entirely? So again, if we don't understand the meaning of these words, and if we don't understand the context of the books of the Bible, we can draw some conclusions that look solid but are completely false. Because you could, if you think evangelist is somebody who travels around preaching revival meetings in churches, and if you think Timothy is a pastor, then you could read 2 Timothy 4:5 and think that it is instructed by God, inspired and written through Paul, but the instruction to pastors is that they ought to travel around and preach in other people's churches. That's like a command. But that's not what it's saying. This is very, very far removed from the truth of what is being instructed here. It's not instruction to a pastor to go and preach in other churches. The instruction is to a missionary to travel and preach the gospel and baptize believers. That's what the instruction is. Because he said, do the work of an evangelist. We only have one person in the whole Bible who's called an evangelist. Philip is called the evangelist. So the word evangelist only appears twice in the Bible.